We've all been there, haven't we? Standing at a crossroads in a relationship, that moment where you find yourself asking that universal, often really heart-wrenching question, shall I stay or shall I go? It's a fundamental human dilemma, isn't it? It feels like the biggest decision, like a clear, definitive fork in the road, where one path feels inherently right and the other, well, by definition, must be wrong.
Mhm.
But what if that simple binary choice, that black and white thinking, actually hides a much more complex truth about love, loss, and even growth?
That's exactly right. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is that this isn't just a question reserved for romantic relationships, even though that's often, where our minds go first. This profound dilemma applies to pretty much any significant connection in our lives, maybe a close friendship that's evolving or a family dynamic that's shifting, even a long-standing business partnership. Any bond where our paths might naturally diverge or where we feel that compelling pull to intertwine more deeply, it confronts us with this very same question. It really sets the stage for a truly nuanced discussion, one that moves us far beyond the simple, often kind of insufficient binary answers we typically look for when facing such a pivotal decision.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Our mission today is to really embark on a deep dive into the profound complexities of these pivotal relationship decisions. We want to truly explore what it really takes to make a connection not just survive, but to truly thrive and, work effectively. And perhaps most importantly, we're going to try and uncover the hidden dynamics that so often lie beneath our surface, conflicts the things we think we're fighting about versus what's truly at stake. We want to move beyond that superficial understanding, the sort of he said, she said of daily arguments, and really get to the intricate, often surprising core of what makes or breaks our bonds.
hmm And in doing so, the insights we're about to explore, well, they're going to challenge a lot of conventional wisdom. Based on years of observation and the wealth of research we've reviewed for this deep dive, we're going to offer a fresh and, we believe, deeply insightful perspective on commitment, on the often difficult process of personal change within a relationship, and on truly understanding the why behind our biggest relational challenges. It's about learning to see the unseen forces at play, the unconscious patterns that shape our interactions and ultimately our happiness.
The inevitable paradox of choice and loss in relationships.
Right. It sounds like the ideal, doesn't it? We all sort of yearn for it, that moment when you make a decision about your relationship, and it just feels 100% perfect. Like, absolutely no lingering doubts, no hesitation, no second guessing. We picture that moment of absolute shining clarity, a lightning bolt of certainty confirming you're on the right path. But what if that very expectation, that search for perfect certainty, is actually a trap? What if it fundamentally blinds us to the real, intricate nature of choice itself, especially when it comes to matters of the heart?
Oh, absolutely. That expectation of 100% perfect choice with not a shred of doubt or hesitation, it is absolutely a setup for disappointment. It's almost guaranteed to leave you feeling as though you failed or maybe that you've chosen incorrectly if you can't achieve that, well, frankly, unattainable standard. True decisions, especially in deeply personal and emotionally charged matters like relationships, they inherently involve nuance, complexity, and critically, trade-offs. There's simply no such thing as a completely flawless, regret-free path that just presents itself with shining clarity. I mean, think about it. Every choice, by its very definition, means choosing one thing over another. You pick a flavor of ice cream, you've chosen against all the other delicious flavors. You choose a career path, you've chosen against other fascinating avenues. And the higher the stakes, the more complex the trade-offs become. We often romanticize the idea of the one perfect choice, but reality is, well, it's far more textured.
And here's where it gets really interesting because it connects directly to what you just said about trade-offs. Whether you choose to stay in a relationship or whether you choose to go, regardless of the path you take, there's an inherent, unavoidable sense of loss that comes with every single choice. We instinctively associate loss primarily with breaking up, right? With leaving something behind. But the truth is, it's far more pervasive and often far more subtle than that. It's woven into the very fabric of making a decision.
That's exactly it. This concept of universal loss is absolutely fundamental to understanding our emotional landscape after any major relational decision. It's not just about what you gain, it's also about what you inevitably relinquish. Let's maybe break it down a bit because it manifests differently depending on your choice. Okay, so if you make the difficult, often excruciating decision to leave a relationship, you must be able to grieve. And this grief isn't just for the bad times or the pain or the disappointment you experienced. It's much deeper. You have to be able to grieve the loss of things that were genuinely good, the shared laughter, maybe the comforting routines that were once a part of your daily rhythm, those moments of deep connection and understanding. You grieve the simple presence of that person in your life. But beyond that, you also have to grieve the loss of the dream of what the relationship could have been. That potential future you may be meticulously envisioned together, the holidays, the shared goals, the quiet companionship into old age. That future now ceases to exist. It's a loss of a shared history, yes, but also a loss of an ideal that never fully materialized, or simply the future you had begun to construct in your mind. This loss is concrete, tangible, tied to both what was and what could have been. It can feel like a part of your own narrative has been, well, ripped away. But here's the less obvious and often more surprising part. If you consciously choose to stay in a relationship, you also have to grieve. It's true. You have to grieve the part of you that will never know what it would have been like if you had actually left. It's the loss of an alternative life, the unknown possibilities that the other path offered. Think about the new experiences you might have had, the different version of yourself you might have become, the lessons you might have learned, or the new people you might have encountered if you had chosen to walk away. That path, that alternative future, well, it's now closed off to you. And even though you made a conscious, often difficult choice to stay, a part of you will forever, perhaps quietly, wonder about that road not taken. So it's crucial to understand this profound truth. Every choice comes with loss. The consequence of any decision you make, big or small, is intrinsically tied to the choice you didn't make. That other path, that other possibility, that alternative future, that is the thing you were letting go of. And that letting go, by its very nature, involves a form of grief.
That just reframes everything, doesn't it? So even if you feel with every fiber of your being that you made the right choice, the absolutely correct decision for you, one that aligns with your values and deepest needs, that doesn't magically make the grief disappear. It might be a quiet, lingering grief that you simply couldn't make it work despite your best efforts. It could be the grief that those high hopes you started with simply didn't materialize, or that the person you thought they were, or maybe you were, didn't turn out to be the one meant for that journey. Or perhaps it's a profound grief tied to wishing you hadn't made certain mistakes, deeply regretting actions you took or didn't take. And sometimes, for those who stay, it's even the grief that you wish you had left sooner, acknowledging the precious time and emotional energy spent on a path that ultimately wasn't right for your growth. It's all part of the complex, often messy, but always, well, human tapestry of connection and disconnection.
Precisely. This experience of grief, in any of its forms, whether for a lost past, a vanished future, or a foregone alternative, it does not in any way invalidate the correctness or wisdom of your decision. In fact, research into emotional processing suggests that acknowledging and allowing this grief is a vital part of fully integrating your choice and moving forward. It's a natural, profound emotional response to the inherent complexities of human connection, the winding paths we choose, and the ones we inevitably leave behind. It is simply a testament to the depth of feeling involved in these pivotal life choices, a sign of what truly mattered.
And for some individuals, unfortunately, the pain of a breakup or separation can be so incredibly intense, it's described with terms that sound almost physical. An ache, a deep consuming longing, and an internal fracturing, where the desire to reunite or the dwelling on what was becomes almost obsessive. It's not just sadness, it's an all-consuming, almost visceral feeling that can feel impossible to escape.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and it's a phenomenon that neuroscience actually helps us understand. While not every breakup reaches this level of intensity, we need to acknowledge and validate the more extreme forms of heartbreak. In severe cases, the experience can mimic profound withdrawal symptoms because, as studies using fMRI have shown, romantic rejection actually activates the very same brain regions that are highly involved in addiction. We're talking about areas rich in dopamine, like the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. These are the brain's primary reward pathways, the ones that light up when we crave and consume substances like drugs or alcohol. So when that deeply valued romantic connection is severed, it's not just emotional pain, it's a neurochemical withdrawal. Your brain is literally craving the dopamine hit that was associated with the person and the relationship. This can lead individuals to feel literally trapped in rumination, unable to escape the constant loop of thoughts and memories, obsessing over what went wrong, what could have been, or how to get the person back. It's like a relentless craving for the lost person, a profound and very real, very difficult emotional state that can feel impossible to break free from. I've observed countless individuals caught in this cycle, and understanding its neurobiological roots can be a powerful first step towards healing.
Wow. Okay, so if the decision to stay or go is fraught with such deep and complex emotional landscapes, filled with inherent loss regardless of the path, and can even trigger such profound, almost addictive pain. Let's now pivot our focus. For those listeners who are committed to trying to make their relationships work, for those who do want to find a path forward together, what have experts observed over the years that it really takes to make things turn around? What's the truly pivotal element for positive, lasting change?
The path to saving a relationship, the power of looking inward.
Right. This is where we often run directly into our initial deeply ingrained assumptions about what saving a relationship actually entails. We tend to think it means adding more to the outside. We need more date nights, more time spent together, more grand gestures, more acts of service. We often focus intently on what the other person needs to do, what changes they need to make to improve things for us. We become laser focused on their flaws, their habits, their perceived shortcomings. But what's the surprising and frankly often incredibly difficult truth about real sustainable change in a relationship? Is it really about external additions or demands, or is it something much more fundamental?
Yeah, the core insight, really gleaned from decades of relational psychology and countless hours observing couples in distress, is that it's actually not about asking the other person to do all the changing. That's our default setting, isn't it?
Sure.
We, as individuals, naturally tend to get to a place where we think, okay, you need to change this. I'm going to tell you exactly what you could do differently that would make this relationship better for me.
Mm-hmm.
We become architects of their supposed flaws,
Yeah.
meticulously listing all their deficits rather than observers of our own contributions to the dynamic. This approach, while common, is rarely effective in fostering genuine, lasting change.
And that, I found, leads directly to what is arguably the single hardest thing to do in a relationship. It's not about confronting them, right? It's about turning that intense spotlight inward and asking yourself, with genuine curiosity and courage, what can I do differently? What am I consciously or unconsciously contributing to this dynamic? And how can I shift my own patterns and responses? It's a profound act of self-responsibility that often feels really counterintuitive when you believe your partner is the problem.
The profound impact of self-change stems from the deep interdependent nature of relationships. We often forget that we are not isolated islands, just operating independently. Instead, we are integral, connected parts of a larger system, constantly influencing and being influenced by one another. I sometimes like to think of it with the figure 8 analogy, which is a common concept in systems theory. Imagine two circles intertwined, forming the shape of an 8. My actions, my words, my reactions, they don't just exist in a vacuum. They start a loop that flows between us. I start to do something which makes you do something, which makes me do something. Our actions are constantly influencing and responding to each other in a continuous flowing pattern. It's a dynamic, interconnected dance where each partner's moves kind of dictate the others. Consider a very concrete example, one that often plays out in relationships. The criticism-defensiveness cycle. You see this a lot. If one person consistently responds to a partner's criticism with an equally aggressive or defensive reaction, maybe shutting down, lashing out, justifying that dynamic is relentlessly reinforced. But what happens if you, as one person in that dynamic, consciously choose to stop reacting in the accustomed way? If I no longer engage in the argument or become defensive when you consistently criticize me, there's a good chance that at some point you're going to stop making those criticisms. Why? Because you're no longer getting the familiar reaction, the accustomed response that sort of fueled your behavior. The pattern is broken.
Right, you're taking the air out of it.
Exactly. Or consider a more subtle example. One partner feels constantly overwhelmed by household tasks and silently resents the other. Instead of continuing to seethe or make passive-aggressive remarks, if that partner starts explicitly asking for help, or maybe even just leaving one task undone to see if the other picks it up without prompting, the dynamic shifts. They're changing their own pattern of silent suffering. So while it's not a 100% guarantee that your partner will immediately transform, it's a powerful principle to keep in mind. There's truly no better way to change the other person than to consciously and consistently change ourselves. Your shift necessitates a shift in the other person's behavior because the old dynamic, the old figure 8, well, it no longer holds.
That's incredibly powerful. It really asks you to take ownership of your part in the dynamic rather than just, pointing fingers. So, for anyone listening right now, thinking about their own primary relationship, what's one specific thing you could choose right now, today, that you know would actively improve your relationship? Perhaps it's something you've heard your partner subtly or directly ask for, something you inherently understand about your shared dynamic, or even just a personal habit you know isn't serving the connection. What is that one intentional choice you could make starting today?
Absolutely. Think about it. Instead of instantly walking out of the room or emotionally withdrawing every time an argument escalates, what if you chose in that very moment to stay, to truly listen, not just for your turn to speak, but to pay genuine attention to what's being said, to the underlying emotion, even if it's messy or hard to hear? How might that single intentional choice to stay present and engaged create a completely different outcome compared to constantly thinking about all the good reasons why you should disengage or leave or shut down in that moment? Or another example, if you find yourself always waiting for your partner to initiate intimacy or thoughtful gestures, what if you chose to initiate simply because you desire more connection? It's a shift from reactive defense to proactive connection, and it's a profound act of self-agency within the relationship.
Hmm. This idea of focusing on self-change, it brings us to an even deeper layer of understanding conflict. Because so often when we're in the thick of it, the problem seems undeniably to be someone else's behavior, their attitude, their entire approach to life. It feels like they are the obstacle, the sole source of friction. But is that really what's going on? Is the surface problem the true problem, or is there something far more fundamental at play that we're missing?
Beyond the surface, unpacking the real fight in operating systems.
Oh, this is such a common narrative in relationships, isn't it? One that resonates across countless couples. I hear people say things like, they don't dream enough, they're too pragmatic and stifle my ambition, or conversely, they dream too much, they're completely unrealistic and never grounded. Then there's, they have too many friends, they're never home, always out socializing, or even they have no friends, they're isolating us, expecting me to be their entire social world. It's fascinating, isn't it? We seem to find issues at both ends of the spectrum, always seeming to have fundamental problems with how our partners simply live their lives, like how they structure their day, their social interactions, their ambitions, their very essence. It's rarely about a specific task, but about a fundamental way of being.
It is fascinating. And that's because we're often operating from what I call our deeply ingrained operating systems. These aren't conscious choices we make as adults. They're deeply ingrained patterns, the default settings for navigating the world, often formed during our formative years. Our family culture, our earliest experiences of safety, belonging, and how conflict was managed. We unconsciously project our own way of living, the norms and rhythms instilled in us by our upbringing, onto our partner. We strongly believe that our way is inherently right, the correct or superior way to navigate the world, to manage a home, to relate to others. And because of this deep-seated belief, we unconsciously expect our partner to conform to our established system. It's not usually a malicious act, but an ingrained, often invisible, one that causes immense friction.
Oh, I can relate to this so much. Even with something as seemingly trivial as household chores. It feels almost silly to bring up now, but it was such a source of contention early in my marriage. In my house growing up, the routine was clear. We'd eat dinner, then we'd all hang out, enjoy some conversation, relax a bit, maybe play a game, and then at the end of the night, we'd wash the dishes together or put them in the dishwasher. It was a clear, established flow that prioritized connection before cleanup. But in my wife's home, their system was entirely different, almost the inverse. They'd eat, immediately wash the dishes, make sure everything was spotless, and then they'd feel truly relaxed and hang out. The cleanup was a prerequisite for relaxation. So, when we got married and started living together, this tiny, seemingly insignificant difference in dishwashing routines created so much friction. It really did. In my mind, when my wife started cleaning immediately, I was thinking, great, we've eaten, now let's enjoy each other's company, talk, laugh, connect, we'll get to the dishes later, they're not going anywhere. But in my wife's mind, she was thinking, okay, we've eaten, now we have to clean up, make sure everything is spotless, and then we can truly relax and hang out. It escalated so quickly. Something as small as this dishwashing routine and the timing of it created such bad communication and intense feelings. It quickly devolved into accusations like, oh, you don't care about me because I wasn't helping with the immediate cleanup, or you don't appreciate me because I wasn't valuing the effort she put into maintaining a clean home, or you don't value the work I put into preparing this meal because my delayed cleaning seemed to devalue her effort. So much emotional baggage came from something that, on the surface, was just about dirty plates.
Exactly. And what your anecdote so perfectly illustrates is the core issue in such scenarios. You both had not actively created a new shared belief system together for your married life. Instead, you are each operating based on two separate, old, adopted belief systems, your individual operating systems, that you had simply internalized from your childhood homes. And that's where many, many challenges in relationships arise, because we attempt to impose our operating system onto someone else rather than consciously and collaboratively co-creating a new shared one with our partner. You weren't fighting about the dishes. You were, without realizing it, fighting about the underlying unspoken rules of engagement in your home, the implicit values you each held about order, relaxation, and togetherness. The material we've reviewed emphasizes that the most successful relationships are not where two people magically merge, but where they successfully negotiate and create a third, unique operating system that works for them.
That's such a profound way to phrase it. It leads directly to that powerful revelation we often discuss, which has truly been a game changer for me. It's not what you fight about, it's what you fight for. It shifts the entire perspective from surface level annoyances to deeper, more meaningful needs.
It truly does. When couples are fighting about what appear to be surface issues, like when to do the dishes or managing finances or how to raise children or even something like holiday traditions, they're almost always, without realizing it, actually fighting for deeper, more fundamental needs. These are the underlying dimensions of conflict that experts have categorized into three core sets of issues, which often get conflated. The first is power. This isn't necessarily about domination or control in a negative sense, but rather about who gets their way, who defines the rules for your shared life, who has influence over decisions. Is there a sense of equity in decision-making? For example, a fight about how to budget for a vacation might really be about who holds the power to make major financial decisions or whose preferences get prioritized. The second is trust. Can I truly rely on you? Do you have my best interests at heart, even when we disagree? Are you dependable and consistent in your actions and words? A disagreement about punctuality, for instance, might not be about the clock, but about whether one partner feels they can trust the other to honor commitments and respect their time. And the third, which is incredibly crucial and often overlooked, is value or recognition. Do you see me? Do you appreciate my efforts, my contributions, my very essence, and who I am? For example, that dishwashing argument you mentioned earlier might have been less about the dishes themselves and more about one partner feeling, I made this nice meal, I went out of my way to be kind to your friends, and you don't value me because you're not acknowledging my effort or aligning with my needs for order. The surface fight is about the dishes, but the underlying fight is for a sense of appreciation and being seen, of having your efforts and preferences recognized as valid and important.
Yeah. Once you truly understand this hidden dimension, this deeper layer beneath the visible conflict, the seemingly trivial fight about when to do the dishes, or about anything else for that matter, becomes so much clearer. It's no longer just about one person trying to impose their way because they inherently believe their way is simply right. It's about recognizing the deeper unmet need or fear that's truly driving the conflict, and that changes everything about how you approach it.
Precisely. You might genuinely think your way is the right way, and that's natural given how deeply ingrained our operating systems are. But the question then becomes, what happens when you have to confront yourself with someone who is genuinely, fundamentally different from you? Someone who operates from a different system, with different rhythms and values, different ways of defining comfort or efficiency. Because everything about relationships, at its core, is about straddling sameness and difference. It's about navigating that inherent tension between the comfortable familiarity of shared experiences and the challenging newness, the delightful yet sometimes irritating differences that a partner brings to your life.
So how do we navigate this fundamental tension between our own ingrained operating system and our partners? If our partner's way feels inherently wrong or at least significantly different to us, is letting them influence us or adopting some of their ways always a loss of giving up of who we are? Or is it actually an opportunity for something more expansive, a way to grow our own identity and enrich the relationship?
Embracing difference, an opportunity for relational expansion.
This is the scenario we hear about constantly, isn't it? Not just in therapy, but from friends, family, and popular culture. Couples often come to therapy or even just complain endlessly to friends, wishing their partner would simply understand that their way of doing things is the absolute best, most efficient, most logical, or most morally correct way. They might even explicitly or implicitly ask the expert or their friends to fix their partner, to help their partner see the light and adopt their family's traditions or their personal routines or their approach to finances as the right way forward. It's a subtle plea for conformity, isn't it? A hope that the other person will eventually become more like them.
It is indeed, and it leads us to a crucial question for anyone in a long-term relationship, particularly those struggling with persistent disagreements. Can letting the other person influence you, truly internalizing their perspective or adopting some of their ways, actually be experienced as an expansion of your own identity rather than a loss of it? How do you let someone in? How do you genuinely integrate their influence without constantly feeling like you're in a defensive stance, guarding your flag, your core values, your established way of doing things, your ingrained operating system? Because for many, giving in, or even just compromising, feels like a diminishment of who they are, a betrayal of their authentic self. The material we've explored indicates that this perceived loss of self is one of the biggest unspoken barriers to relational growth.
And what's interesting is how these differences, which might initially seem minor, evolve over time. Those initial quirks that might have once seemed charming or simply interesting, like, oh, you do it that way, how quaint, how different, slowly but surely become profound points of contention. Why? Because a truly unified, co-created agreement isn't reached. The unresolved tension festers, turning a charming difference into a recurring, predictable source of conflict. It becomes the go-to point of disagreement every time you need to talk about backgrounds, values, styles, or priorities. It's like a paper cut that never fully heals, constantly being reopened.
Precisely. And this is often compounded by a deep-seated, sometimes unconscious, fear of concession. People frequently feel robbed of their power if they give in, even on a small matter like a preferred vacation destination or the order of chores. There's a profound concern that if I concede this one point, my partner will perceive me as the more submissive one in the relationship, or worse, that if I concede now, then in the future, when we're making bigger, more significant decisions, they're going to expect me to always concede. They'll assume I'm naturally agreeable, always willing to give in, creating an imbalanced dynamic where one person always wins and the other always loses. And often, tragically, that is the case in some relationships. People enter them because they believe, often subconsciously, that the other person is submissive or overly agreeable or will simply align with everything they say. Then one day that person wakes up and has a rude awakening, realizing, wait a minute, I didn't realize I just gave up everything I care about for you, piece by painful piece. This moment of realization can be incredibly jarring, leading to a deep, simmering sense of resentment, or a sudden, forceful, and often explosive assertion of identity and boundaries. I've seen countless instances where one partner, who had been quietly compromising for years, suddenly explodes, leaving the other bewildered, unable to understand what happened.
Right. So if that fear of concession is so powerful and the idea of giving up power feels so threatening to our identity, how do we learn to practice that humility, that intentional giving up of power, if you will, not as a loss, but as an act of relational strength and embrace of expansion? Or is the ultimate goal always a perfect, unified agreement where both parties see eye to eye on every single thing, or one person consistently defers to the other? Because it feels like if we're constantly pushing against difference, we're missing an opportunity.
That's the crux of it, really. And it leads us to an even deeper truth about what's really happening beneath the surface of what appear to be power struggles. Because if the goal isn't a perfect merger and the fear of losing ourselves is so potent, we have to look at what's truly driving that resistance.
Deconstructing power struggles, fear as the true driver.
It often seems like in almost every relationship, there's one person who is more afraid of losing the other, right? Of abandonment, of being alone. And then there's often one person who's more afraid of losing themselves, of suffocation, of being completely subsumed by the other's identity or needs. You see one who tends to acquiesce, maybe to pacify, to say yes, perhaps, until one day they just can't anymore and resentment boils over. And you see the other person who is more afraid of being controlled, and therefore they fiercely fight for their ideas, their ways of doing things, even down to the timing of the dishes or the choice of movie. It feels like a constant push-pull of who has the upper hand, who controls the narrative, who defines reality in the relationship. But is this really about power in the traditional sense, or is there something else, something far more fundamental driving it?
This is such a critical distinction and one that so often gets missed. The majority of what we perceive as power struggles in a relationship are, in fact, not about power itself. Power in this context is actually a defense mechanism. These control battles, these relentless arguments over who's right or who gets their way, are the ways people defend themselves against deeper, more primal anxieties. They are trying to get something they are worried about losing, or prevent something they are afraid will happen. It's surface-level behavior masking a deeper emotional state, a profound underlying fear. For example, some people, when they are afraid, they fight. Their automatic response to feeling vulnerable or threatened is to escalate, to control, to dominate, because that is their learned mechanism for managing internal discomfort. The real issue isn't the fighting itself or the need to win the argument about the dishes. The issue is the underlying fear that drives the fighting. They're trying to deal with their fear. Perhaps the fear of being insignificant or unseen or controlled by gaining control of the situation, by imposing their will, because that feels safer than vulnerability or uncertainty. It's a protective mechanism, but one that ultimately sabotages intimacy. And this applies not just to overt fighting, but to other controlling behaviors. Stonewalling, hypercriticism, passive aggression, these can all be defenses against a deeper fear. One individual I worked with consistently used passive-aggressive remarks about her husband's spending. On the surface, it seemed like a money issue, but beneath it was a profound fear of financial insecurity rooted in her childhood, manifesting as a need to control every dollar.
Wow. And this is why you simply can't just go for what you see on the surface. What you see isn't necessarily just what it is. It's crucial to always look a level below, to dig deeper, to ask why, rather than just reacting to the what, or you'll find yourself perpetually stuck in the same exhausting cycles, addressing symptoms rather than causes. You'll be locked in that figure eight we talked about, unable to shift it.
Precisely. And this requires a profound level of introspection, looking at your own history and learned behaviors, especially those from your formative years. We have to ask ourselves a powerful, often uncomfortable question. Who did you have to fight with in the past, whether it was a parent, a sibling, or maybe a difficult circumstance that made you feel you had to go all the way with such intensity, with fists, metaphorically speaking, to hold your ground?
Yeah.
Who or what taught you that aggressive defense was the only way to feel safe or seen? That combative motion of fighting, the physical and emotional stance of contention, might be deeply ingrained from past experiences where it was necessary for survival or self-preservation. And yet, you enter a new relationship, often yearning for closeness, intimacy, and genuine connection, which creates a deep contradiction between your ingrained defensive motion and your desire for genuine partnership. You have to delve into your own narrative and ask, what happened to me in my formative experiences that makes me continuously interpret almost every situation, every disagreement, every perceived challenge to my operating system as a fight, a power struggle, a desperate need to stand up and hold on? Because if I give in, this is the beginning of a slippery slope, a loss of self, a complete erasure. This ingrained perspective frames your entire reality within the relationship. It's a learned schema, a blueprint of how you expect interactions to unfold.
And crucially, that's a frame. That is not the absolute truth of the situation. It's a lens through which you're viewing the world, influenced by your past, but not necessarily reflective of the present reality.
Yes, exactly. And while it's entirely possible you've picked somebody who sometimes, maybe inadvertently, triggers this old pattern in you, the real transformative question turns inward. For you, the listener, the question becomes, what happens if you don't get your way? What happens if the other person gets their way on this particular issue? Can you still feel confident? Can you still feel okay, secure in yourself and in the relationship, even if you don't trample somebody or dominate the situation? Even if you allow yourself to be influenced or to concede a point without feeling diminished? This encourages a profound shift from defensive control, which is born out of fear and the need to dictate outcomes, to a place of internal security and confidence, regardless of the immediate outcome of a disagreement. It's about finding peace within, even when things don't go exactly as you planned, because your self-worth is no longer tied to external control or winning every battle.
Wow, what a journey we've been on today. We've truly peeled back so many complex layers on the hidden dynamics of relationships. We started by understanding that every significant relationship choice, whether to stay or to go, comes with an inherent, often surprising sense of loss, a necessary grief for the path not taken, a testament to what mattered. We then explored the profound truth that true, lasting change in a relationship starts not with demanding it from your partner, but by courageously looking within yourself and shifting your own patterns. And crucially, we discovered that our conflicts are rarely about what they seem on the surface, but rather about deep-seated fundamental human needs like power, trust, and the profound desire for value and recognition. Finally, we delved into the surprising revelation that what often appears to be a power struggle is, at its core, a powerful defense mechanism against underlying fear, a fear rooted in our own past experiences.
What's truly fascinating here is how these insights open up a continuous, lifelong journey of self-discovery and relational growth. It really does. It's about moving from a place of simply reacting to our partners and our situations to a deeper understanding of ourselves and them, and most importantly, understanding the underlying currents that shape our interactions. It's about transforming our relationships from cycles of defensiveness and control to genuine connection, collaborative creation, and profound mutual understanding.
So what does all of this mean for you, navigating your most important relationships right now? Our provocative thought for you to mull over after this deep dive. How might truly understanding your own personal operating system, those deeply ingrained ways of living, reacting, and defining what's right and critically, how might identifying those underlying fears that often drive your behavior reshape your next difficult conversation with a partner, a friend, or a family member? What hidden dimension might you truly be fighting for, or perhaps unknowingly fighting against, the next time conflict arises? And what might happen if you approach that fight not from a place of defense, but from a place of deeper understanding and courageous self-awareness? It's a question that can truly transform how you show up in your most important connections, leading to deeper intimacy and profound personal growth.